Cryptocurrency's use in illicit activity has been a hot topic lately, so much so that politicians in the United States recently decided to hold a hearing about it. 4 experts in crypto crime were invited to testify as part of the hearing, and what they said could have huge implications for cryptocurrency. Today, I'm going to tell you who testified at the hearing, examine the attitudes of the politicians present, and what it could all mean for the crypto industry. Before we get political, I need to tell you something critical. Giving you financial advice would make me a criminal. That's why everything in this video is purely empirical. Please contact a financial advisor if your portfolio is looking pitiful. Now, if this is the first time you come across the Coin Bureau, my name is Guy and I believe fiat currencies are going to zero. It's one of the many reasons why I create high-quality content about crypto. Coins, tokens, news, reviews, and other info that will help when the money printers explode. If this is the sort of stuff you want to know, subscribe to the channel and ping that notification bell below. If time is robbing you blind, you can use the timestamps below to skip ahead to any topics that tickle your mind. Just remember that the ones who don't watch until the end will end up behind. So, now that we're aligned, let's see what was said during the hearing about crypto crime. The hearing I'll be analysing took place on Thursday, March the 17th. It was organised by the United States Senate Committee on Banking, Housing and Urban Affairs, which consists of 24 senior US politicians from both political parties. The hearing was titled, quote, "Understanding the Role of Digital Assets in Illicit Finance," and it was held primarily because of the concerns around whether Russia is using cryptocurrency to evade the sanctions levied on it in response to its invasion of Ukraine. It appears that the hearing was also, to some degree, a part of the US President's executive order on digital assets, which called on government entities to establish comprehensive crypto policies. This executive order was issued 1 week earlier. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, 4 individuals were invited to testify at the Senate hearing, and the lineup could not have been more interesting. The first witness was Jonathan Levin, a co-founder and chief strategy officer of Chainalysis, a company that tracks crypto transactions. Despite its controversial reputation in the crypto space, Chainalysis is actually very pro-crypto as a company, and even added Bitcoin to its corporate balance sheet late last year. The second witness was Michael Mosier, the former acting director of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. What makes Michael interesting is that he actually used to work for Chainalysis. Michael was hired by Chainalysis back in 2019 when he was working as a standard official at FinCEN, and he rejoined FinCEN as acting director in April last year before leaving again in August. The third witness was Michael Chobanian, founder of the Kuna cryptocurrency exchange and the Ukrainian Blockchain Association. Michael has actually been helping the Ukrainian government process the $100+ million of crypto donations it has received so far. And not only that, but Michael is still in Ukraine and testified virtually from the middle of a war zone. As you can imagine, Michael had some pretty crazy things to say about what's going on there, and to make sure you don't mix him up with the other Michael, I'll refer to him as Michael Ukraine and the former Michael as Michael USA as we go along. The fourth witness was Shane Stansbury, a lecturer at the Duke University School of Law who specializes in cybercrime. Shane also used to work as an attorney for the United States government. Shane isn't exactly pro-crypto, but the biased composition of the witnesses present already speaks volumes to how most US politicians have been feeling about the industry, or rather, how aware they are that US voters are overwhelmingly pro-crypto. If you want more evidence of that, you can check out my recent video about the 2 testimonies from Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. That will be in the description if you're interested. Anyways, the Senate hearing on crypto crime began with opening statements from the top-ranking politicians on both sides of the aisle, followed by opening statements from the 4 witnesses. The first to go was Senator Sherrod Brown, and he couldn't have been any more negative about crypto. He talked about how crypto is used in ransomware, how crypto is used in terrorist financing. He argued that crypto facilitates crime. He argued that criminals prefer crypto, he said that crypto exchanges overseas aren't complying with regulations and that this means Russians can use crypto to evade sanctions. Next up was Senator Pat Toomey, who started by saying that regulators should be careful not to impose any rules that restrict the growth of the crypto industry, and that the lack of regulatory clarity is why so many crypto companies are setting up overseas. He also said that there is no evidence that Russian oligarchs have been using crypto to evade sanctions and cited various US intelligence departments as his source. As far as Pat is concerned, crypto should be viewed in the context of the Ukrainian side of the conflict, specifically how crypto donations have been used to help Ukrainian citizens in need. Then Jonathan Levin took the stage and started by bragging about how Chainalysis has worked closely with the US government to take down thousands of criminal individuals and institutions over the years, and how this is all thanks to the transparency of cryptocurrency transactions. Jonathan then dropped a dank statistic from Chainalysis's crypto crime report for 2021, and that is that just 0.15% of all crypto transactions are related to criminal activity. More about that in a moment. Jonathan's right-hand man, Michael Mosier, aka Michael USA, was next to take the stand, and he started by pointing out a very important fact that has flown under the radar of everyone in cryptocurrency, including me. In late 2020, the US government partnered with USDC stablecoin issuer Circle to send foreign aid to Venezuelan citizens, and Michael USA seemed to imply that this is not the only case where this has happened. Specifically, he said that stablecoins are being used to, quote, preserve democracy. That's pretty scary to think about, but it's one of the many reasons why I don't see a stablecoin ban in the United States anytime soon. I digress. Michael USA went on to say that the early internet had lots of criminal activity as well, but we didn't see regulators crack down on the internet back then, nor should we see regulators crack down on crypto today. Michael USA concluded with 3 recommendations on how to reduce crypto crime. First, increase FinCEN funding, and I'll quickly point out that a portion of this funding will probably end up in the coffers of Chainalysis, given that it works closely with FinCEN. Second, expand whistleblower programs for financial institutions that aren't implementing adequate anti-money laundering or know your customer standards. And finally, encourage the Financial Action Task Force to go after any companies that aren't complying with its so-called recommendations. If you're wondering what these recommendations are and why Michael USA's third recommendation is terrifying, you can check out my video about the FATF's plans for cryptocurrency using the link in the description. Anyhow, Michael Chobanian, aka Michael Ukraine, was the next witness to take the mic, and he started by talking about what he witnessed on the first day that Russia invaded Ukraine. He says he woke up to the sound of explosions on Thursday, the 24th of February, and he immediately knew what was happening. Michael Ukraine said his son was confused when he explained that Russia had invaded because they have so many Russian friends. Because where they were was no longer safe, Michael Ukraine and his family fled to the western part of the country, which is relatively safe, at least for now. Michael Ukraine then pivoted to the topic of crypto and how he's been working with the Ukrainian government to ensure Ukrainian citizens in Russian-occupied territories have enough crypto to pay for food, water, and other necessities. Michael Ukraine then condemned certain crypto exchanges for continuing to allow trading pairs involving the Russian ruble, but explained that Russian oligarchs cannot use crypto to evade sanctions due to a lack of liquidity. In plain English, if you want to cash out billions or even just millions of dollars worth of crypto, you can't do that using a crypto exchange, or else you'll drain the order books and crash the price. This means the only option Russian oligarchs have is to do over-the-counter or OTC trades, and this requires finding someone wealthy who's willing to buy a large amount of sanctioned cryptocurrency, and it's likely that nobody is willing to do that, lest they face sanctions themselves. Shane Stansbury then took his turn, and he essentially said that criminals use crypto for everything, especially ransomware. He also said that crypto-related crime is growing and pointed to North Korea as proof that rogue regimes are using crypto to fund their operations. Shane even went as far as to claim that tracking crypto transactions is not nearly as easy as it's being made out to be, and though authorities are getting better, it still takes years to untangle crypto-related crimes. This reminded me of the crazy couple who were caught allegedly laundering billions of dollars of BTC stolen from Bitfinex, and you can find out what happened there using the link in the description. Anywho, with the opening statements out of the way, the questions began, and Senator Sherrod Brown was the first to take his shot. Sherrod asked Jonathan how crypto criminals are hiding their tracks, and Jonathan said that the biggest black boxes are actually cryptocurrency exchanges operating overseas, and that privacy-enhancing techniques such as chain hopping and mixing have limited effects on concealing crime. Sherrod then asked Shane about how criminals are using crypto, and he reiterated that ransomware is where crypto crime reigns supreme, and he certainly has a point there. Sherrod shifted his focus to Michael Ukraine and asked him why the United States should crack down on Russian cybercrime. Michael Ukraine had a surprising response, and that's that crypto is ultimately like nuclear energy. Whether it's good or bad ultimately depends on how it's used. Michael Ukraine also highlighted the fact that the only thing the Russian oligarchs can do with their crypto is watch the numbers go up because they can't cash out, and they also can't buy much in Russia with crypto because so many companies have pulled out of the country. Senator Pat Toomey kept the spotlight on Michael Ukraine with his questions, and he started by asking why people are donating crypto and not fiat to the Ukrainian government. Michael Ukraine started by saying that Ukrainian banks aren't as connected to the rest of the financial system as Western banks, and this means it takes days for any donations or payments to come through. By contrast, crypto donations and payments are instant, and when you're in the middle of a war, time is of the essence. Moreover, the universality of crypto means these donations and payments can come from anywhere in the world, even largely unbanked countries, which have apparently also donated. Pat followed up with a question about what Ukrainian citizens are using crypto for, and Michael Ukraine explained that Ukraine was already a hotspot for crypto adoption prior to the conflict. As such, it's common to see payments made in major cryptocurrencies as well as stablecoins, and this trend has only accelerated because of the conflict, particularly because it's difficult to purchase products from other countries using Ukrainian hryvnia. Pat then turned to Michael USA and said that FinCEN's implementation of the FATF's travel rule of tracking every transaction above $10,000 is excessive, since most criminal transactions are far larger than that, and transactions just within the $10,000 range are overwhelmingly legitimate. Pat asked Michael USA whether there's an alternative threshold that could be used for cryptocurrency, and Michael USA confirmed that the transparency of cryptocurrency blockchains means a travel rule could be applied to transactions deemed suspicious, rather than those above a certain dollar amount. Michael USA continued by saying that FinCEN doesn't have the resources required to engage in this kind of financial oversight, and some would say that's not necessarily a bad thing, since what counts as a suspicious transaction is likely to be arbitrary and inconsistent, if you catch my drift. Jonathan added his 2 cents by agreeing that $10,000 is a silly reporting standard for crypto, mainly because the transparency of transactions means you can just track them all. Yikes. You can find out how companies like Chainalysis track your crypto transactions by checking out my video about them using the link in the description. Now, back to the hearing. Senator Bob Menendez brought up crypto mining as part of his questions and asked Shane whether Russia could use crypto mining to evade sanctions. Even though Shane had established himself as the anti-crypto witness by this point, even he acknowledged that mining shouldn't be the point of focus, but rather the on- and off-ramps from crypto to fiat or any other asset. Bob then asked Michael Ukraine about the relationship between Russian crypto miners and the Russian government, and his response was pretty epic. In sum, Michael Ukraine believes that most, if not all, Russians using or mining crypto are on the side of freedom, and that they're not at all aligned with the atrocious actions of their government. Michael Ukraine also emphasized that it's impossible to even just move billions of dollars of crypto without being noticed on the blockchain, and that there's also no evidence of any coordination between Russian authorities and Russian crypto miners. Shaken by such a pro-crypto response, Bob turned back to Shane for shelter by asking him what the risks are of not forcing KYC on cryptocurrency exchanges. Shane's response was scams, fraud, and theft, a surprisingly subpar answer. Bob wrapped things up by touching base with Jonathan about ransomware payments being made to sanctioned entities, and Jonathan stated that sanctions have successfully deterred companies from paying crypto ransoms for fear that the US government will come after them. Not spooky at all. Senator Bill Hagerty brought the conversation back to pro-crypto territory by pointing out that US law enforcement agencies have been able to seize billions of dollars of cryptocurrency, and that this proves claims about crypto's use in crime are inconsistent with the facts. Crypto is too transparent for crime's purposes. Bill then asked Jonathan how exactly they identify who owns a crypto wallet, given that this information is pseudonymous by default. And Jonathan said that they can get personally identifiable information from centralized points of access, i.e. cryptocurrency exchanges and other fiat-to-crypto on- and off-ramps. Bill took his point a step further by asking Jonathan whether criminals prefer to use cash because of its total privacy, to which Jonathan answered yes, obviously. Jonathan also stressed that the biggest advantage of tracking crypto transactions is that they're accessible forever because blockchains are permanent records. This is pretty terrifying if you think about it, and it's why many people are so critical of blockchain analytics firms like Chainalysis. You never know how these powers will be wielded by future politicians. Bill went on to highlight how it's ironic that politicians aren't calling for a ban on cash, and asked Jonathan whether it's possible to convert crypto to fiat without the banking system. Although Jonathan said this isn't really possible, I reckon this isn't entirely correct because there's no shortage of peer-to-peer marketplaces for cryptocurrency that don't require a financial intermediary. Bill ended his segment with a question for Michael USA, and that's how crypto-related crime can be reduced. Michael USA's response was to establish clear guidelines as to what's allowed and what's not, and not apply the same outdated standards to the crypto industry. Next up was Senator Jon Tester, who asked all the witnesses present whether Russian oligarchs are using cryptocurrency to evade sanctions. All 4 witnesses answered no, but Shane did add that it's theoretically possible. Damn it, Shane! John then asked Jonathan a non sequitur, and that's why law enforcement authorities couldn't recover all the crypto from the Colonial Pipeline hack if Chainalysis's crypto tracking tools are so good that they know Russian oligarchs aren't evading sanctions. Jonathan answered that it's simply not always possible to recover all the crypto involved in a crime, but John the Senator wasn't having it. He asked Shane if it's difficult to connect crypto payments to people, and Shane said yes, but said it's still possible to do, given enough time and information. John ended his session with a snarky comment about how cash can't be used for crime because it's hard to move large amounts of it in a discreet manner. I guess John has never heard of the biggest banking fraud in history, and if you haven't either, you can learn about it using the link in the description. Now, Tina Smith was the next senator to get her questions in, and she started by asking Jonathan why it's so important to have reasonable crypto regulations in the United States. Jonathan's response was kryptonite to anti-crypto politicians, and that's that allowing crypto tech to develop outside of the United States poses a serious risk to national security. I'm surprised he didn't drop the mic after that. Tina then asked an odd question, and that's whether crypto companies are the same as regular companies, to which Jonathan responded yes, and hinted that they're trying to help uninformed politicians realize this. Tina finished by sending a question over to Shane about how crypto regulations help fight crypto crime, and after shilling for KYC across the board, Shane stated that the Bank Secrecy Act should be enforced on cryptocurrency. That's code that every crypto transaction above 10K should be reported to authorities. Some people just can't be helped, and this is certainly the case for the next senator who's took the stand, the one and only Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth basically argued with Jonathan about the use of crypto in crime, and she refused to accept his explanation that Russian oligarchs can't use chain hopping, mixers, or other privacy-preserving technologies to evade sanctions because there isn't enough liquidity available with these methods. Because she needed a pretense to present her latest anti-crypto bill, Elizabeth asked Shane whether it was possible for her, quote, hypothetical oligarch to evade sanctions in all the outlandish ways she described. And Shane said yes, but only if it's done through a jurisdiction that's friendly to Russia. This was a not-so-subtle reference to news reports, FUD in my opinion, about OTC dealers in neutral countries being contacted by supposed Russian oligarchs. I cover news like this in my weekly crypto reviews, and you can find the latest episode in the description. Now, where was I? Yes, the queen of crypto. I am, of course, referring to Senator Cynthia Lummis, who began with a based question directed to Michael USA, and that's if he'd rather investigate a crime involving cash or crypto, and why. Michael USA said he'd much prefer to investigate a crime involving crypto because transactions are way more transparent. Cynthia then repeated the statistic about crypto crime that Jonathan had mentioned earlier, 0.15% of transactions being related to illicit activity. Well, Cynthia wanted to take this statistic one step further by asking Jonathan how it compares to the traditional financial system. Last Jonathan checked, between 2 and 5% of all regular transactions are related to illicit activity. To put things into perspective, that's 10 to 30x more than crypto transactions. Cynthia then turned to Michael Ukraine and asked him how long it took the Ukrainian government to set up the infrastructure required to accept crypto donations, and how long it took using regular financial rails. Michael Ukraine said it took just 10 minutes to set up crypto wallets to receive donations, and it took a staggering 10 business days to set up the infrastructure on the fiat side. Cynthia asked Michael Ukraine to elaborate about how much crypto has helped the country, and he said the ability to accept donations from around the world and spend them instantly has made all the difference in this conflict. Cynthia ended her allocated time by turning to the anti-crypto politicians in the room and asking them why they're not paying attention to cryptocurrency in the context of Ukraine, as per Pat Toomey's opening statement. Senator Mark Warner began his allocated time on a similar note by saying he's aligned with Cynthia's views on crypto's use in Ukraine. Then he ruined it all by saying he's proud to be sponsoring Elizabeth Warren's latest anti-crypto bill because all Russians must be sanctioned and not just the oligarchs. If that wasn't ridiculous enough, Mark straight up said that he doesn't believe 0.15% of crypto transactions are related to crime because the number is just too low to be true. You can't make this stuff up. To add insult to injury, Mark asked Shane to confirm his suspicions, and Shane confirmed that the percentage of crypto transactions related to illicit activity is much, much higher without any evidence. Because there was still some time left for Mark to make more insane claims, he casually commented that Russia's cooperation in tracking down the people who hacked the colonial pipeline is proof that it's using crypto to evade sanctions. And I thought my mate Mad Mike was mad. Moving on. Senator Catherine Cortez Masto cautiously approached her question period with some real noobish inquiries. It's okay, everyone has to start somewhere, and we've all been there before. Catherine asked Jonathan about the risks of crypto crime, and spotting her lack of understanding, Jonathan geared his answer to a conclusion that FinCEN requires more funding. Jonathan then passed the baton to Michael USA, who said the same thing. Recall that Chainalysis works with FinCEN. Catherine then asked Jonathan if crypto is going away, and no, I'm not joking. Jonathan said no, and so Catherine asked Shane if he has anything else to add, and he also said no. Realizing that she was losing the room, Catherine called on Michael Ukraine to explain what he's seeing when it comes to Russians using crypto, and he said that regular Russians are dumping the ruble to preserve their purchasing power with crypto, and they should be allowed to do so. Then Senator John Reed jumped in with a question for Jonathan, and that's how Chainalysis tracks criminal crypto transactions. Jonathan was visibly confused, and he answered by saying Chainalysis doesn't just track criminal crypto transactions, it tracks all crypto transactions, and its team of experts looks for anomalies in these transactions as evidence that something illicit is occurring. Jonathan went on to address the ridiculous claim by Senator Mark Warner that crypto crime is being undercounted, and specified that Chainalysis explicitly overestimates crypto crime to make sure it catches everything. Senator John then asked another odd question, and that's whether Russian oligarchs want to use crypto to evade sanctions. Well, Jonathan didn't really have an answer, and how could he? He's not a Russian oligarch. Senator John finished with an unexpected question for Jonathan, and that's whether crypto will replace fiat because the Federal Reserve is printing so much money. Jonathan said crypto will complement the dollar, but I think we all know what's really going to happen. The next politician to pump out questions was Senator Chris Van Hollen, and he hit Jonathan with a jarring question. Isn't it a fact that cryptocurrency is the choice of payment for ransomware criminals? Jonathan began by saying yes, but contended that criminals are purely economic actors. They focus on profits, not privacy, and that's why most of them use BTC and inevitably end up getting caught when they try and cash out using a platform that requires KYC. Chris then looked Jonathan straight in the eye and asked if the feds had hacked the Bitcoin blockchain to recover the BTC paid as ransomware in the Colonial Pipeline hack. It looks like Chris missed the memo on what happened there, but luckily Jonathan let him know that the only reason why the feds were able to recover the BTC was because the criminals had left their private key on Google Drive. It's funny how all these tech-savvy criminals make the most amateur mistakes, eh? Unfazed by his unawareness, Chris pivoted to cryptocurrency exchanges and asked Jonathan if there are sufficient consumer protections against stuff like hacks. Jonathan acknowledged that there aren't many safeguards there, and he said it doesn't matter because we're starting to see heavily regulated players in traditional finance enter crypto with trading and custody solutions of their own, namely big banks. On that note, it looks like the SEC might be waiting for these big banks to set up crypto custody solutions before approving a spot Bitcoin ETF, and you can find out what's going on there by using the link in the description. As the hearing came to a close, select senators took it upon themselves to ask questions that clearly demonstrated their ignorance. First up, there was Kirsten Sinema, who asked Jonathan how Chainalysis can track transactions without breaking the blockchain, and I just have no words. Jonathan hit Kirsten with the facts, and I'll leave it at that. Kirsten then asked Jonathan whether Chainalysis tracks chain hopping and mixers, suggesting she hadn't been paying much attention to the hearing up until that point. Jonathan humoured her by confirming that they do in fact do this and revealed that Chainalysis can demix certain transactions. This is again because there isn't always enough liquidity in mixing protocols to mask large transactions. Kirsten took what was left of her time to bring Michael Ukraine back into the conversation, asking him why Ukraine's legalization of crypto is important, and part of his response was that Ukraine will welcome all US crypto companies once the war is over, if the US has too many crypto regulations. The second senator to ask a stupid question was Steve Daines, and he asked Michael USA about how crypto is converted into fiat. Michael USA explained the simple process and said that it's difficult to do so in the context of sanctions because of the lack of liquidity for large crypto cash-outs. Steve then asked Michael whether public blockchains help track crypto transactions, again suggesting that he hadn't been paying much attention to the hearing up until that point. Michael USA said yes and repeated the terrifying fact that all crypto transactions are permanent before saying privacy is part of the US Constitution. This is coming from the same guy who wants to track every crypto transaction based on elusive criteria. Steve then asked Michael Ukraine how his government is spending all its crypto donations, and he went on to list all of the things you'd imagine before saying that all these transactions are transparent thanks to cryptocurrency. The last senator to ask questions was Pat Toomey, which was a tad surprising because he had asked his questions already. In any case, he condemned Elizabeth Warren's anti-crypto bill before asking Michael Ukraine what the overlap is between Russians using crypto and the Russians who oppose the regime. Michael Ukraine repeated that the Russians using crypto know what's really going on, and that they're Ukraine's closest friends in this conflict. He also slammed Elizabeth for going after these Russians and said Western countries should only be going after the individual Russians responsible for the conflict. Speaking of sanctions, the economic response to Russia is starting to have a ripple effect on the lives of the average person, and it looks like that ripple could soon become a wave. More about that in the description. And now for the big question. What does all this mean for crypto? I'll start by saying that I've seen enough of these hearings to know that most US politicians are pro-crypto. The only problem is that the reasonable crypto regulations some of the people in power are proposing go a little bit too far. If you think about it, this hearing fundamentally has to do with one thing, and that's financial surveillance. This is exactly where I'm worried we'll see some overreach, and it certainly doesn't help that Chainalysis and FinCEN seem to be working together to secure more funding for each other. As a wise man once said, there is nothing so permanent as a temporary government program. And insisting on funding to track an ever-growing number of crypto transactions is a great way to secure your retirement. Then again, I'd rather have officials from Chainalysis and FinCEN on the stand than anyone else, and I have a feeling that a lot of the things they're saying are just to appease politicians who don't quite understand the technology behind cryptocurrency, nor its mass appeal. That said, it's clear that the few anti-crypto politicians around aren't going to answer to facts and stats, and the good news is that the anti-crypto bills they're proposing are probably dead in the water. I also want to say that it was amazing to watch Michael Chobanian put all these politicians in their place, and I have a feeling some of them invited him with the expectation that he'd be pushing for aggressive crypto regulations in the name of Russian sanctions evasion. I'm certainly happy that didn't happen, and I think it speaks volumes to how much the crypto community has in common, regardless of ethnicity, religion, or nationality. Now, I firmly believe that this unity will drive the adoption of cryptocurrency, and the way the world is looking these days, unity and cryptocurrency are the two things we need most. Those are just my thoughts though, and I'd love to get yours in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed the video, smash that like button to let me know, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ping the notification bell before you go. If you're looking for more from the Coin Bureau, you can check out Coin Bureau Clips for more crypto shows. I also have a crypto podcast that's perfect to listen to when you're on the road. You can also find me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and get your dose of daily crypto updates on Telegram. If you're looking to make your portfolio better, look no further than my weekly newsletter. It's packed with all the tools, tips, and tricks you need to turn your crypto bags from red to green. If you want to show the world you're part of the crypto scene, the Coin Bureau merch store is where you can find hoodies, sweaters, tees, beanies, and mugs with crypto themes. Just follow the links down in the description if you please. If you made it this far, you're the best. Thank you so much for watching. Time for me to get some rest. Till next time, my friends, this is Guy bidding you goodbye.